What are the origins of the Ba'ath Party? The Ba'ath Party in the Arab world. Two very consequential leaders, Saddam Hussein and Hafiz al-Assad, were Baathists. Were they aligned in their goals and worldviews? The Ba'ath Party. So, what is the Ba'ath Party? It is the party that Saddam Hussein belonged to. It is the party that Hafiz al-Assad belonged to, and as a consequence, Bashar al-Assad, his son, also belonged, well, you could say, to the Ba'ath Party. So how come? So first of all, we're talking about Iraq and Syria. Where is Iraq? Where is Syria? Let's find out. Let's go to the map and figure out the which part of the world are we talking about. We're talking about West Asia, obviously. So let's focus on that part of the world. So if you're in India, go westwards, cross the temporary nation, cross Gandhar. We have Persia. You cross Persia, go further west. We come to Iraq and Syria. So we're talking about these two nations. The capital of Iraq is Baghdad, and the capital of Syria is Damascus or Damascus. Okay, these two nations we're talking about. So there was this political party that encompassed both these nations. Actually, how did that happen, right? And how did the leaders of two nations belong to the same political party? It's a very good question, isn't it? The Ba'ath Party. So what's the story? What's the history of the Ba'ath Party? The origins of the Ba'ath Party go back to the 1940s. We're talking about a time when the world was at war, the Second World War. Okay, the 1940s we're talking about. And there were two Syrian intellectuals. One was a Christian. There are Christians apparently in Syria. So one was a Christian and one was a Muslim. You can look up their names. One was Michel something. There was Saladin something. Salah al-Din something. Two intellectuals, one Muslim, one Christian. They founded something called the Arab Renaissance movement in Syria, in Damascus. And the objective, the goal, was to promote Arab nationalism. But what kind of Arab nationalism? Secular Arab nationalism. Okay, it starts with secularism. And it's not surprising given the way it eventually evolves. Because Saddam Hussein's Iraq was a secular nation, by the way. It was not an Islamic nation officially. It was a secular nation. So the origins are in Damascus in the 1940s. It is these two Syrian intellectuals who start this movement, the Arab Renaissance movement. The objective is to promote secular Arab nationalism. Okay, and this movement was formally established in 1947. I think that's a date all Indians can remember. It was established as the Resurrection Party. Now, how do you say resurrection in Arabic? You say Ba'ath. So it became the Ba'ath Party or the Resurrection Party. And they adopted a constitution based on various pillars like unity and freedom and socialism. Okay, socialism. So it was about Arab nationalism. It was about unity, freedom, socialism. It was about decolonizing the region because it was under, it had been under European control for a very long time, right? So that's what happened. And in the 1950s, the Ba'ath Party, it merged with the Syrian Socialist Party. And it was eventually renamed as the Arab Socialist Ba'ath Party. Okay, so that's in the 1950s, but it's still just a movement. It's not in power. Now, in 1963, in Syria, military officers of the Syrian military, of the Syrian army, who were aligned with the Ba'ath Party, who belonged to the Ba'ath Party, they conducted a coup d'etat in Syria, and they seized power in Syria. So the Ba'ath Party in 1963 comes to power in Syria. And it's in the 1960s that Hafiz al-Assad becomes a prominent leader, a prominent politician. And Hafiz al-Assad, sometime in the 1960s, he engineers a split of the party, of the movement, into two camps, the Syrian camp and the Iraqi camp, or the Syrian branch and the Iraqi branch. And their ideologies and agendas start diverging in the 1960s. Then in 1968, the Iraqi branch of the Ba'ath Party, it conducted a coup d'etat in Iraq, in Baghdad, and they took control of the government in Baghdad. And it was a person called al-Bakr who became the president of Iraq. He was the first Ba'athist president of Iraq. So eventually, Hafiz al-Assad becomes the most prominent guy in Syria, to the east, to the west of Iraq, right? And in the 1970s, he becomes the most powerful person in the Baath party in Syria. He assumes total control and total power, Hafiz al-Assad. And the Western historians will tell you that he established a security state, a totalitarian security state. And, it was rooted in a cult of personality. It was rooted in personal loyalty to the man, Hafiz al-Assad. And the core officers who were loyal to Hafiz al-Assad were the Alawites, the Alawi. They belong to the minority Alawi sect of the Syrian population. Okay, so that's in the 1970s. Then there is transformation in Iraq as well, and in 1979, Saddam Hussein emerges and becomes the president of Iraq. He forces out the person who had become the first president, Mr. Al-Bakr. He forces him out, and he becomes the president of Iraq. And then, in a very famous televised conference or something, a meeting in a very large hall, he publicly purged all his rivals in the Baath party to completely and totally consolidate power within his person. So there's a recording. There are multiple recordings of this available on YouTube. Okay, it's a black and white recording in which Saddam Hussein is sitting on the stage, and he's got these papers with him. He's smoking a cigar, and he's reading out names one by one. He says that if I read your name out, there's a huge audience in front of him. He says that if I read your name out, stand up, recite the party slogan, and go outside of the hall where you will be taken care of, let's say. And that becomes, I mean, killing. Name after name comes up. The person has to stand up. Some people protest. They are escorted out. They're pulled out. And one can imagine what happened to those people whose names were spoken by Saddam Hussein, called out by Saddam Hussein. So Saddam Hussein becomes the all-powerful leader of Iraq, right? So that is what happened. Then in the 70s, late 70s, there were some attempts to unify the Syrian and Iraqi states, but you see, when you have two strong leaders, there's gonna be ego clashes, there's gonna be rivalry. So you have Saddam Hussein in Iraq, you have Hafiz al-Assad in Syria. They would not get along, right? And then the two nations become rivals. They become rivals to such an extent that when there was a war between Iraq and Iran, which is from 1980 to 1988, the Iran-Iraq war. At that time, Syria sided with Iran, not with Iraq, despite both nations being ruled by the Baath party, right? So Syria took the side of Iran when Iran was at war with Iraq, despite Syria being ruled by the Baath party, by the Syrian Baathist party, and Iraq being ruled by the Iraqi Baath party. So clearly, the two nations were not aligned. The two leaders were not aligned. They were on opposite ends of the, they were essentially rivals. And that caused rivalry between the two nations themselves. And that essentially is the story of the Baath party. And eventually, now, Hafiz al-Assad gave, he once he passed away, the power was taken by his son, the mantle or the baton or the crown, let's say, passed on to his son, Bashar al-Assad, who was ousted recently this year by al-Farah, who is a former terrorist, formerly wanted terrorist, ISIS terrorist, that sort of thing. Yeah, so regime change operation has happened successfully, and the Baath party is no longer in power in Syria. And when it comes to Iraq, it was the Baath party was ousted in 2003, was it, when the Americans invaded Iraq for the second time and obliterated the nation. So that was the story of the Baath party. The Baath party's origins are in Syria. A Muslim and a Christian came together to start this movement that eventually became the Baath party. With two very consequential leaders, Saddam Hussein and Hafiz al-Assad, were both Baathists, but they were not aligned in any way in their goals, and they were actually rivals. And the Syrian Baath party lasted longer than the Iraqi Baath party, and both were ended by a foreign power, the same foreign power, the United States. That's the story of the Baath Party.